Welcome back, my dear listener. Today I'm gonna tell you the story of Clara, a young woman whose dreams are shattered when a bloodied letter reveals a chilling prophecy of her impending doom, one she cannot escape. If you enjoy this story, give it a like, turn on notifications, and subscribe, so you never miss another scary story. And remember, I'm always listening. Suggest a story if you dare, and I'll craft a special one just for you. Now, get ready, and follow me down into the darkness. In a small town, where shadows danced with the light and secrets festered beneath the surface, a chilling day began for one young woman named Clara. Clara was a simple, sweet soul with dreams like the bright stars that filled the night sky. She loved to paint, capturing the beauty of her surroundings with bright colors. Each stroke of her brush brought life to her canvases, which were filled with blooming flowers, vibrant sunsets, and the cheerful laughter of children playing in the park. However, this day was different from all her others. The sun hung faint in the sky, cloaked in dark clouds as if it sensed the horror to come. As she went to check her mailbox, Clara felt a strange unease settle deep in her chest, tightening it like a heavy weight. The air was thick and unnerving, heavy with something she could not quite understand. It smelled like rain mixed with something metallic, and strange chill crept up her spine. With each step toward the mailbox, her heart began to pound louder, almost drowning out the soft whispers of the wind. When she reached the mailbox, she spotted an envelope. It was odd, an old, yellowed piece of paper sealed with a thick, red wax that had a strange symbol stamped into it. It looked ancient, almost as if it had traveled through time to reach her. The sight filled her with apprehension, yet she felt a spellbinding curiosity. Driven by an unseen force, she picked it up, curiosity fighting against her instinct to flee. Her fingers trembled slightly as she turned the envelope over and felt the coolness of the wax seal pressing against her skin. Once home, Clara sat at her kitchen table, the envelope resting before her, staring at it as if it were a puzzle waiting to be solved. It felt warm to the touch, as if it held a secret only she could uncover. She shot nervous glances around her cozy kitchen, with its sunflowers in a vase on the table and the smell of her last paint session still lingering in the air. She hesitated, biting her lip, but her curiosity compelled her. With shaky hands, she broke the seal and unfolded the paper. The words blurred as she read the blood-red ink that splattered over the page like drops of spilled paint. "Your fate awaits you, Clara. In mere 2 days, you will fall." The note was a warning and an unnerving prediction of her future, telling her exactly how she would die. Clara shivered. Fear coursed through her veins like icy water. The details were grotesque, an accident foretold, a horrific fall happening in 2 days. Her mind raced. A part of her wanted to believe it was a cruel joke or a figment of her imagination, but the unsettling truth settled in her mind like a heavy weight, making it hard to breathe. How could this be real? Who would send such a horrible message? Time began to creep by in an eerie silence, each tick of the clock echoing ominously around her, as though the universe was mocking her plight. 2 days passed painfully slow. Clara tried to carry on with life like she always did, but the words from the letter buried themselves deep in her thoughts. They replayed like a terrifying song on a loop, echoing in her mind long after she read them. She found herself avoiding stairs, unable to shake the feeling that danger lurked in the simplest of places. Every time her foot landed on a step, her heart skipped a beat, as if warning her of the impending doom. When she painted, her brush trembled in her hand, and the colors seemed murkier, losing their vibrancy as they mixed together. Each swirl of paint felt heavy, dragging her spirit down, clouding her mind like the dark clouds hanging over the town. She couldn't shake the feeling that shadows began to loom larger in her periphery, as if they were ready to swallow her whole. The paintings that once sparked joy now whispered fears. The once bright hues morphed into a dull palette of gray. On the morning of the ominous date, Clara woke early, dreading what was to come. The sun feebly broke through the clouds at last, casting an unholy light on everything it touched. Clara sat up in bed, her heart racing against her ribcage, a bird trapped in a cage. She could barely swallow breakfast, her thoughts consumed by foreboding, making her stomach churn as if it were a stormy sea. As she ate her toast, the slice feeling heavy in her mouth, she sat by the window and watched the town slowly wake up. Birds chirped, and children laughed outside, yet everything felt wrong. The world appeared altered, drenched in a sinister glow, and with each tick of the clock, Clara felt the grip of anxiety tighten around her chest. She was aware that she had only a few hours left, and the thought was like a shroud over her mind. Desperate to distract herself from the doom that seemed ever closer, she decided to go for a walk, hoping the fresh air would soothe her troubled heart. The world outside felt alive. The trees swayed gently, and flowers bloomed busily under the creeping sun. But as she stepped outside, the comforting chirps of the birds felt eerie, twisting into sounds of mockery instead of music. Everywhere Clara looked, shadows seemed to twist and turn in grotesque shapes. It was as if the town itself was alive with malevolent energy, laughing at her fear. As she passed by familiar shops, their doorways seemed to sag under the weight of decay and dread, and the windows that once sparkled now appeared cloudy and dull. Clara could feel her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. She quickly walked on, trying to shake the bad feeling that seemed to cling to her like a shadow following her every move. Even when she returned home, the unease refused to leave her. It clawed at her mind like a scrabbling bird trapped beneath a roof, flapping and screeching in panic. She gazed once more at the ominous letter, the bloodied words glaring at her like a menacing ghost, refusing to let her go. It cast an uneasy feeling over her home, transforming her once safe haven into a cage constricted by the sadness of her thoughts. She suddenly realized how fragile her existence felt, as if the ground beneath her could open up and swallow her at any moment, leaving behind nothing but silence. Time slipped through her fingers, each moment feeling thicker than air. As evening fell, the walls began to close in, and shadows pooled in sinister corners, jagged and malformed as they stretched like ominous hands beckoning her towards the darkness. Clara's pulse quickened. She felt many eyes watching her, lurking as if ready to spring. It was likely in her head, but the unsettling sensation was powerful, urging her to hide or run. She fought against the terrible emotions bound to overwhelm her, but the shadows followed in relentless pursuit, echoing the words of the terrible letter over and over in a guttural whisper. Finally, night fell. Clara made her way to her small bedroom, her heart pounding louder than before, each thump resonating in her ears. The clock ticked away mockingly in the stillness, and she lay in bed wide awake, battling the fear that threatened to consume her. Closing her eyes, she thought of brighter moments, vibrant sunsets, painted with golden and pink hues, and laughter of friends tumbling like colorful balloons into the air. But the bloodied letter was never far from her mind, an ever-present reminder of her cruel fate, flapping at the corners of her consciousness. Sleep overtook her at last, but her dreams turned into nightmares. The weight of darkness pressed down on her, squeezing her like a tense rubber band ready to snap. The words from the letter became images of horror, swirling together like a storm cloud ready to burst. As she fell deeper into despair, a grotesque figure danced through her dreams, its features unrecognizable, a twisted facade of malice. Shadows reached out with long, gnarled fingers, stretching closer and closer, and her heart raced as she screamed, yet no one could hear her. In the distance, she could hear the clock ticking, each sound taunting her, counting down the moments to the dreadful fall. Clara wanted nothing more than to wake up, to escape this nightmare. But something dark and heavy held her down, choking the air from her lungs. She thought of her paintings then, the joy they had once brought her, and she clung to that thought like a lifeline. As she gripped it tightly, a spark of defiance ignited within her heart. The darkness may taunt her, but Clara was not ready to give in. Not yet. Somehow, she would find a way to fight back against the shadows that threatened to engulf her whole. There had to be a way to change her fate. In that moment of determination, the light flickered as if in response. Clara held onto that flicker as tightly as she could, promising herself that she would find a way to break free. Even if the shadows loomed large, and the words of the letter clawed at her soul, she refused to let fear win. Hope flickered dimly in her chest, and with it, a sense of purpose began to rise. Tomorrow would come, and with it, a chance to confront whatever awaited her. She would not let the shadows win. Not without a fight. Morning light crept in through the window, spilling golden rays across the room. Clara's eyes fluttered open, but instead of feeling hope or joy, she was met with terror. She jolted upright in bed, her heart racing wildly like a frightened bird beating against its cage. Today was the day. She could feel its weight pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. As Clara sat there, frozen in her bed, she recalled the horrible letter. Her mind conjured the memory of the words, twisting and turning in her thoughts like a dark shadow. Could she survive until evening? Or was this the day she would meet her terrible destiny? The questions rolled over her like waves crashing against the shore, drowning her in anxiety. Clara took a deep breath, trying to find strength within herself. The morning sun warmed her skin, and she focused on that. She needed to push the fear back, to stand firm against the darkness that threatened to swallow her whole. She had to take action. With trembling hands, she grabbed her phone off the bedside table and dialed her closest friend, Lily. "Please come over," she pleaded, her voice shaky. Clara needed a friend. She needed someone to help her battle the monsters that danced in her mind. When Lily arrived, Clara immediately felt a spark of warmth fill the room. Lily was like a bright star in the night, a glowing beacon shining through the dense fog of fear that enveloped Clara. They hugged tightly, and just for a moment, Clara felt reassured. The playful laughter of their conversation filled the corners of the room, echoing like sweet music. However, Clara couldn't let go of the gnawing panic inside her. It sat heavy in her stomach like a rock, refusing to be moved. As they chatted, Clara forced a smile, masking the panic that clawed at her insides. They shared funny stories, reminisced about their childhood adventures, and joked about their school's silly rules. It was comforting for just a little while, but as the clock ticked away, the hands felt like they were pulling Clara deeper into a pit of dread. Each laugh they shared felt like nails against a chalkboard, a reminder that danger lurked close by, ready to pounce. As the day wore on, the sunlight that filled Clara's room began to dim, giving way to shadows that stretched across the walls, twisting into dark shapes that seemed to whisper secrets. With the clock inching closer to 3 o'clock, Clara's heart sank further. Could time really be running out? The thought sent chills down her spine, and she glanced at Lily, who was still chatting happily about their favorite books. Clara's stomach churned uneasily. Suddenly, the cheerful chatter took on an uncomfortable weight. Clara felt a shroud of foreboding press down on her. It felt like the world outside her window was still bright and colorful, but inside her heart, there was only darkness. Unable to bear it, she excused herself, needing a moment of peace. She rushed to the bathroom, breathing hard as she grasped the edges of the sink, attempting to ground herself. The cool porcelain felt solid beneath her fingers, and she splashed cold water on her face, but the reflection staring back seemed foreign. It was a distorted figure, like a ghost trapped in the mirror. Clara's mind spun with images of twisted metal, jagged edges, and shadowy figures that lurked behind her consciousness like a waking nightmare. She felt dizzy and overwhelmed. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, taking deep breaths and trying to will the panic away. Eventually, Clara returned to the living room, her heart still pounding in her chest like a wild drum. She tried to present a brave face, putting on a smile that felt more like a mask than a true expression. But as the minutes dragged on, the conversation stuttered and fell into a heavy silence. The air felt thick and heavy, filled with the weight of what was to come. Lily looked over at Clara, her eyes filled with concern. "Clara, is everything okay?" she asked softly. Clara's heart fluttered in her chest, and she felt the last thread of hope slipping away. It's the letter," Clara blurted out, the words tumbling forth before she could hide them. "It said something terrible is going to happen today. I don't know what to do." She finally released all the fear and confusion she had been holding back, her voice trembling. Lily listened intently, her expression shifting from concern to disbelief. "Clara, letters can't predict the future. You know that. Maybe it's just a coincidence. You're letting this consume you," she said gently, trying to soothe her best friend's worries. But Clara could only nod, her heart still racing. The clock on the wall seemed to mock her as it ticked away, reminding her of the time slipping through her fingers. Then, without warning, a loud knock reverberated through the house, startling both girls. Clara's heart jumped, and panic gripped her like icy fingers squeezing her throat. Who could it be? She exchanged a frightened glance with Lily, silence enveloping them. Clara's fingers trembled as she reached for the door handle, steeling herself against whatever terror awaited her. Opening the door felt like stepping into a void. A figure cloaked in shadow stood at the threshold, and a chill swept through Clara. The person didn't say a word. Their presence felt heavy and dark, as if they carried a piece of the night with them. Clara's breath caught in her throat, and she felt a wave of fear wash over her, thick and suffocating. As quickly as the figure had appeared, they vanished into the night, leaving Clara standing there, heart pounding like a hammer. "What was that?" she whispered, turning to Lily, panic evident in her eyes. They decided to bolt the door, pushing the heavy wood against its frame and barricading themselves from anything that lurked outside. Back on the couch, trembling hands clasped tightly together, Clara's heart raced as she felt time slipping away. It was as if fear itself had taken on a life of its own, tightening around her chest like a vice. The warm sunlight had fled, and shadows engulfed their little space, stretching and creeping as the sun sank lower in the sky. With every tick of the clock, the dread inside her grew, becoming a lurking monster in the shadows. Clara felt so lightheaded, the fear seemed to reach out, squeezing around her heart. The atmosphere in the room was changing, growing heavier. One moment it felt blisteringly hot, as if the walls were closing in, and the next, it was as cold as winter. The combination was confusing. She clutched Lily's hand tightly, feeling the warmth travel from her friend's palm into her own. "Stay with me, please," she muttered, her voice breaking as she tried to mask her fear. The darkness wrapped around them like a haunting fog, filling the air with uncertainty. Every shadow seemed to whisper her name, a chilling reminder of the approaching hour. Finally, as if sensing Clara's distress, the power flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. The only sounds came from the rhythmic ticking of the clock, each tick feeling like a countdown to something terrible. Fear wrapped around Clara's heart, squeezing tightly like a python. She could hardly breathe. "What do we do?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper, her eyes wide with terror. The room felt like a cocoon of gloom, and she strained to hear anything through the oppressive silence. It seemed like time itself had stopped, leaving her in a moment stretched long and thin, fraught with uncertainty. Lily squeezed Clara's hand tighter, offering comfort even in the dark. "We'll figure it out together," she said, trying to sound brave. Clara could see the flicker of determination in Lily's eyes, a small spark against the dismal backdrop. "Let's think of the best thing we can do right now. Let's stand strong. If we face whatever's coming together, we'll be okay." Clara took a deep breath, letting Lily's words wash over her. Together, they would find strength. They would fight against the fears trying to suffocate them. Clara thought of all the adventures they had had as kids. The treehouse in the backyard, the tent they built for campouts, and all those nights spent giggling under the stars. If they could face all those harmless adventures together, they could make it through this scary day as well. With each passing moment, Clara felt a flicker of hope igniting within her. She gripped Lily's hand tightly, drawing strength from her friend's presence. No matter what dangers lay ahead, Clara was no longer facing them alone. Together, they would face the fall. The minutes dragged painfully as shadows flickered in the dim light, creeping closer with each second. Clara clung tightly to Lily, her heart pounding in an erratic rhythm that drowned out everything else. It felt as if the very air around them was charged with a feeling of dread. Whispers twisted through the darkness, echoing like distant screams, growing louder and more threatening with each heartbeat. Dark shapes danced outside the window, moving with an eerie grace, lurking just out of sight, the air thick with malice and uncertainty. As the clock neared 6, Clara felt an icy finger trace down her spine. A chill ran through her, settling deep into her bones. It sent shivers rippling through her body as if something cold and dreadful was invading her thoughts. She wanted to scream, but the terror lodged in her throat, choking her like vines wrapping around a tree. "Do you feel that?" she managed to ask Lily, her voice a thin whisper that seemed almost swallowed by the dark. She looked into her friend's eyes, searching desperately for assurance and comfort. But Lily's own fear was evident, her wide eyes reflecting the confusion, doubt, and panic that Clara felt within. Then, in a sudden, jarring moment, a loud crash echoed through the house, causing both women to jump. Clara's insides twisted in horror as an unseen force battered the door, the sound reverberating through the walls like a malevolent beast trying to make its way in. It was then that Clara understood the danger was very real, and it made her heart race all the more. "Clara," Lily gasped, gripping her friend tightly, as if by holding on, she could shield them both from whatever lurked in the dark. They huddled together, hearts pounding like drums in the abyss of fear. "It's just the wind," Clara tried to convince herself, even as terror clawed at her soul, urging her to run, to hide, to do anything but face what was coming. The figure they had encountered earlier, the wretched silhouette that had haunted their thoughts, sprang to Clara's mind with terrifying clarity. What if that was real? She whispered, her words barely audible above the pounding in her chest. The fear in Lily's grip tightened, a flicker of panic crossing her face. They could hear the sounds of scratching, something relentless clawing at the heavy door. It preyed upon their minds, absorbing every ounce of hope and leaving them stranded in despair. With each slap and pound against the door, Clara's breath became shorter, harder to draw. The darkness surrounding them felt more alive, as if it were breathing, hungry, ravenous, and waiting. Suddenly, Clara jumped as the power flickered back on. The room was instantly illuminated, though the light felt thin and shaky, as if it was only a mere breath away from being extinguished again. They found themselves encased in a tangled web of shadows and light, the atmosphere suddenly thick and cloying. In that fleeting moment, Clara's vision blurred, and she caught a glimpse of the spectral figure, a wretched creature, its body misshapen and grotesque, eyes glowing like two pinpricks of malice. It was staring directly at her, and a guttural laughter echoed through the room as if the walls themselves were laughing at her fear, filling the air with an unbearable dread. "You can't escape what is written," it hissed, its voice dark and splintering, echoing deep within her mind, piercing her defenses. Violently, Clara surged to her feet, shaking off the terrifying vision. "We have to get out of here," she shouted, hope and panic throbbing desperately in her chest. A surge of adrenaline coursed through her veins, urging her to take action. They needed to break free from the cursed place before the shadows devoured them whole. The front door creaked ominously in front of them, the sound echoing through the heavy silence like the growl of an unholy beast waiting to pounce at any moment. Lily nodded, her face a mask of terror. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape. "Clara, let's go," she urged, her voice higher than usual, a sharp edge of fear slicing through the stillness. They raced to the front door, pushing it open against the weight of dread pressing down on them. But what awaited them outside was only more shadows, a choking darkness that hung in the air, swirling like a storm of malevolent intent. Clara's heart sank into an icy abyss. The last rays of light vanished before their eyes, eclipsed by something horrific and unnameable that loomed just beyond their threshold. Terror turned into despair as they saw figures emerge from the night, those warped shapes slipping through the shadows, grotesque and spectral. Clara felt her heart drop to the pit of her stomach. She blinked hard, hoping it was all an illusion, but nothing changed. The world around her blurred into chaos as the winds howled, pulling at them like an unforgiving tide trying to drag them down. Every single instinct told them to run, to flee from this nightmare, but their legs felt heavy, as if they were glued to the ground under the weight of horror enveloping them like a thick fog. Then, the clock struck 6, the last hour of Clara's predestined horror. The sound of the clock seemed louder than it had ever been, resonating through the house, echoing in her mind. Clara felt her legs tremble beneath her, a storm raging inside her that simply wished to break free and flee from the encroaching doom. A potent feeling of inevitability descended over her, thick and suffocating, as shadows pressed closer around them like hungry wolves closing in on their prey. The grotesque figures surrounding them bared jagged teeth, their faces twisted into menacing grins, slithering through the night like demonic phantoms, mocking the final moments of their lives. Suddenly, Clara's mind raced back to the letter's predictions. The words floated into her consciousness unbidden. At the stroke of 6, darkness will come, and those who remain within its grasp shall not see the dawn. She recoiled in horror, the chilling realization washing over her, suffocating her hopes. The prophecy had been cruelly precise. She felt her flesh crawl with the truth lurking in the depths of that ancient promise. The fall was imminent, and in this darkness, she felt every chilling promise of the letter becoming reality. The shadows coiled around her, tightening like a noose, and she fell to her knees, sobbing for a fate now sealed. Despair washed over her, pulling her under like an endless tide. Lily, Clara whimpered, reaching for her friend, wanting to grab hold of something, anything, that felt real in this terrifying moment. Was this really it? Were they truly trapped in a nightmare with no way out? She battled the tears as panic threatened to swallow her whole. They were in this together, and Clara needed to hold on to that thought, to the belief that hope still existed. Lily's hands were trembling as she knelt beside Clara, fear and determination etched on her face. "Clara," she said softly, her voice steadying despite the chaos around them. "We can't give up, we have to keep fighting." She cast a look toward the approaching shadows, and Clara could see the flicker of courage igniting in her friend's eyes. "There has to be a way out. We can't let them take us." A spark lit within Clara, battling against the overwhelming despair. Perhaps they could fight back. Together, they held on to that thread of hope, searching for a way through the darkness. "What do we do?" Clara asked, looking at Lily, desperately trying to gather her scattered thoughts. "How can we fight them?" Lily looked around, scanning their surroundings for anything they could use, anything that could help them reclaim their agency. The flickering light cast long shadows, creating a maze of darkness that seemed almost to shift and swirl like smoke. "Maybe there's something we can use as a weapon," or, she stopped mid-sentence, and Clara could see a flicker of an idea forming. Without waiting to finish, Lily jumped to her feet and dashed toward the living room. Clara stood up as well, following closely behind her. Their hearts beat in unison, their adrenaline driving them forward. "We can do this. We're not going to let them win," Clara chanted to herself, gaining a sense of strength from her friend's resolve. The living room was dimly lit, but the furniture felt familiar to Clara, a comfort in an overwhelming moment. She rifled through the cabinets, pulling out anything that might help keep the shadows at bay. She found an old flashlight, the kind that felt heavy and sturdy in her hands. "Here," Clara breathed, handing it to Lily, who held it up like a torch, illuminating their surroundings. "Great, let's see if we can shine some light on those shadows," Lily exclaimed, her fear mixing with determination, giving Clara hope. They hurried toward the door again, their spirits ignited and ready to confront whatever awaited them. They stepped outside with the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, pushing back against the encroaching waves of shadows. As the light spilled out, the figures that had seemed so terrible only moments before recoiled, their forms wavering in the presence of the brightness. Clara felt a surge of triumph course through her. Light was their ally. Bolstered by this newfound energy, Clara and Lily stepped forward, the blue beam from the flashlight illuminating their path. A sense of strength pushed against the dark, dispelling the thick miasma that had once smothered them. The shadows shrieked, their terrible laughter replaced by hisses of retreat. "Come on, we'll make it," Clara shouted, her voice steady. A daring plan unfurling in her mind, Clara led the charge, her legs no longer heavy but fueled by hope and daring. The darkness lurked behind them, but the light held it back. They would not go quietly into the night. With each step, they felt lighter and more empowered. Clara held the flashlight before them like a sword, using it to pierce the veil of shadows. "We are stronger than you," she called into the darkness, imagining each word to be a blow against the malevolent forces surrounding them. Together, they would resist, fighting back against whatever fate tried to dictate. Finally, the first signs of dawn hinted at the edges of the horizon, flickering like shy flames of hope. It called to Clara and Lily, beckoning them forward. They raced through the encroaching darkness, determined to reach that sliver of light, that promise of a new beginning. The shadows filled the spaces in between, but each moment brought them closer to freedom. With one final burst of courage, they sprinted into the light, leaving behind the dark. Clara felt the warmth of the dawn's embrace, and together they laughed, shaking free of the remnants of their terror. As they emerged into the early morning light, the shadows receded, their whispers fading into nothingness. They were free, not just from the darkness, but from the fear that had once claimed them. Standing side by side, Clara and Lily breathed in the early morning air, savoring the taste of victory. The cool ground felt like ice beneath Clara's knees as she knelt there, her breath catching in her throat. It was as if the world itself was angry with her, and she could feel it all around her, an heaviness that made her heart race. The shadows were wrapping around her and Lily, pulling them deeper into a feeling of unease. Clara could feel that the very earth beneath them was grieving, trembling like it was alive and burdened with secrets that it refused to share. Lily's scream sliced through the thick silence, a sound so shrill that it echoed like a bell ringing in a dark hallway. Clara's heart pounded louder than ever as her friend's terror broke through the silence. It was a blood-curdling cry, a desperate plea filled with fear. But the sound was quickly consumed by the choking darkness looming over them, as if the shadows were swallowing the echoes whole. As Clara looked around, she felt the weight of the monstrous shapes surrounding them. They were blurred, shadowy figures that seemed to move just beyond the edges of reality. The very air was heavy, tense, like a taut string ready to snap. Clara's heart raced even faster as voices, whispers really, wrapped around her. It was as if they were laughing at her, mocking her in her despair. The letter she had found felt real now, more like a cold, hard truth than ever before. Clara grasped Lily's hand tightly, feeling the warmth of it against the chill in the air. Each breath Clara took was a struggle. It felt heavy and hard, as if she was breathing air thickened with dread. The world around them seemed to be frozen in time, yet it was also slipping away like grains of sand falling through her fingers. Every frightening shadow seemed to inch closer, each moment stretching out painfully, and Clara's heart thundered in her chest. A primal instinct to run surged through her, but her legs felt heavy and rooted to the ground. She was trapped in a nightmare. The clock chimed midnight with a haunting echo that crashed against the silence like a wave against a rocky shore. It was a dreadful sound that seemed to signal the worst was yet to come. The wind howled, joining in the unsettling harmony of fear swirling around them. Clara felt her heart drop, a sensation rippled through her, making her skin crawl. In that moment, it felt as if reality itself was tearing apart. The world around her twisted and folded in upon itself, and she could feel the ground shift beneath her, pulling her into a deep, dark void. The grotesque creature made its appearance, a horrible sight that was more nightmare than dream, opening its jagged mouth wide. Blackness poured out from its maw like a never-ending flood, dragging Clara deeper into shadowy depths where light dared not venture. She was gasping for air, even though it was like trying to grasp water with her hands, impossible and futile. Flashes of images invaded her mind, visions swimming in a sea of blood-soaked memories and cruel laughter that echoed around her. Those horrid moments were laid bare against the backdrop of truth she did not want to face. She could see herself, small and scared, safe within the four walls of her bedroom, the shadows lurking just outside. Efforts to escape from the darkness only seemed to push her closer toward an unseen, terrifying fate. The thought of a normal life drifted away like autumn leaves in a gust of wind, leaving only the chilling certainty of the darkness surrounding them. Tears streamed down Clara's cheeks as she squeezed Lily's hand, their connection a tiny spark of warmth in a suffocating void. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely breaking through the despair around them. But the darkness was too great, swallowing her words. The night was a shroud of sorrow thick enough to smother any hope. Clara felt something shifting within her, a pulse of dreadful inevitability, telling her that this fate was set long ago, with no way to change it. The shadows gathered like thick smoke, wrapping around her limbs and paralyzing her. Clara felt fear settle deep within her chest, almost suffocating. She was caught, a prisoner of her own reality. The dark mouth of the creature widened, and Clara could feel a sharp intake of breath as terror battered against her. In that moment, despair clawed at her insides, twisting her stomach until she thought she might be sick. The laughter rose from the twisted shadows, rumbling like thunder in her ears. It was not a good kind of laughter but an awful mockery that seeped into her thoughts. Silence wrapped around her like a heavy blanket, filling the space where hope might have been. She could feel warmth slipping away from her, the vitality of existence draining out in a slow, painful trickle. With every passing second, she felt herself fading away, becoming something less than human. She was merely a ghost, a whisper lost in the haunting darkness. As the world around her darkened and dimmed, Clara became aware of her own frailty. She was nothing but a flickering flame swallowed by the wind, leaving behind only shadows and silence. There was nothing she could do. She was trapped in a story not of her making, a thread woven into the bitter fabric of fate. The memories of her life, once bright and full of color, faded into the night, replaced by darkness so deep that it seemed to breathe. The shadows danced around them, forever twisting and looping in an endless cycle of fear. Clara felt a chill as the laughter faded into a whisper, echoing long after the sound had ceased. In that suffocating silence, she became something more, a fragment of a story wrapped in inevitability. Here in this forsaken town, where darkness reigned and light dared not enter, Clara was no longer Clara. She was a tragic figure, lingering in the abyss created by a blood-soaked letter that foretold despair, feeding the insatiable shadows hungry for another victim to fall. And as the night stretched on, the silence enveloped her completely, a final embrace of the inevitable, pulling her deeper into the haunting darkness that promised only more despair for the souls foolish enough to wander too close to the edge. In the depths of that silence, Clara was lost, not just from the world, but from herself. She had become a part of the shadows, a whisper of a memory waiting for the cycle of horror to begin again, forever marked by the blood that had begged to tell their tale.